I knew what life insurance was. I didn't know about group life insurance. I wasn't familiar with that. Accident coverage, I didn't know about those things. But when I was introduced to the opportunity, what I did know is what the manager at that time was speaking to made a lot of sense. It made a lot of sense from a coverage and a consumer standpoint, and it also made a lot of sense from a business standpoint. And for my first 6 months in the business, I had to kind of figure out where this was going to sit, because I remember him saying to me in the interview, he said, listen, this is the type of industry where it's not going to be easy. In fact, it's going to be hard. But if you put your head down and you continue to stay focused and you work over the next 12 months, you're going to look up, it's going to be the best professional decision that you ever made. Okay. That conversation changed the course of my life. It changed the direction that I would find myself going on. In fact, it's what brings us to this moment right here, because without that conversation and without me saying, you know what, I'll take that 12 months. I'll take that journey. There is no Encore Insurance Group. There's no introduction to NAAIA. There's no, the friendships that I've established. There's no books, Black Pioneers or Black Innovators. There's no You Should Get a License podcast. There's, none of those things exist without that conversation. And what I learned over the course of that year is, man, this is an industry that is incredibly underrated. It's an opportunity that is incredibly underexposed. And during that time frame, I was able to find success in that company, ended up rising into, the executive levels of leadership within that organization, all the way up until 2020, until the pandemic hit. And in 2020, I had a lot of time to think about what this industry had meant to my life, my professional development. And I had, by this time, of course, made the shift, from the entertainment side into insurance, because after I put the apples to apples in regards to, what was going to be a more efficient and lucrative usage of time, insurance won out, And one of the other pieces is that it's also a value to society as well. Music is a value to society. If you saw the Super Bowl halftime, you know that music is a value to society, right? And you know that art can influence, our actions and how we move. But insurance can do the same thing if we understand our legacy and placement within it. And that brings me up to that 2020 timeframe. During that time when I was thinking, I said, man, what an impact this has had on my life. I remember speaking to my son. He was 15 years old at the time. And no, he was 16, 17, 2020. It's almost 5 years ago. So he would have been 17. He was 17 years old. And everything is shut down. The world is shut down. And we were walking through the neighborhood. And I remember saying to my son, after he reminded me later on, I said, man, there's a lot of people who are hurting right now in this country. There's a lot of people who are hurting in the world. I said, but it's a Tuesday afternoon and me and you are walking through the neighborhood. I'm not pressed to be anywhere. Our bills are paid. Money is still coming in. I mean, things are still moving and running. And it's a result of the industry that I chose to build a career inside of. And I was in an organization that was fairly isolated from the rest of the industry. So I didn't get a chance to interact with people in the same capacity that I do now. But he reminded me of that not too long ago. And in that time frame, I said, man, what can I do to share my experiences? And that's where initially the You Should Get a License media platform came from. It was an outlet to share those experiences, an outlet to share what had happened. Because I remember speaking to other individuals, particularly young Black professionals in the space, and they didn't feel like they could transcend beyond a certain point. They felt like, coming in, they either weren't going to have the networks, they weren't going to have the contacts. No matter what their education was, it wasn't going to be valid enough. It wasn't going to get them to the places that they wanted to be. And they really didn't see the opportunity in an industry like insurance at all. And I said, well, if I can show my face and individuals that I know and don't know can see what I've done. And what I've done is not the pinnacle, but just to see that, hey, you can create a great life in this space. Maybe that'll influence someone else in the future. And that's where the platform came from. Eventually, I started to interview and have conversations with other professionals that I've known in the space. And over the last 3.5 years, that continued to compound. Now, that being said, I began to write a book based on the conversations that I had called You Should Get a License. And that book is also available. So if you are inclined and you want to share insurance careers with someone, then that's a great book for them, because not only is it a guide that talks about the history of our industry as a whole, it also has tools and resources via a directory that I placed in that book, all of the magazines, the trade associations, the websites, organizations like NAAIA, organizations like NABIP, like CPCU, that people can turn to and find some footing in their careers. But while I was writing that book, I began, as mentioned, to look for other influential Black professionals in this industry. Because I remember going to a leadership meeting with my company and being the only Black man there, and being one of 3 Black people there. And the 2 Black women who were there were in administrative roles at the carrier. And I was the only Black person otherwise who was in this other, in the other leadership and management position. I said, man, something's off with this picture. I remember being in that meeting and being brushed off in conversation, although I had earned my way there. You know, I remember, one of my colleagues being, the quote unquote chosen one, the one that everyone identified, as the one who would succeed and be successful, and then over time, that colleague ended up working for me in that organization. But being kind of pushed to the side, having to make my own way, in that company, having to prove, having to have a territory created for me, because there was no territory for me. But I trained the people who worked with me to such a level of proficiency that they had to create this territory in order for this to exist. And then moving to a territory where there was no business and being expected to fail and then exceeding beyond any of those expectations. I know I'm not the only one that has this story. I know I'm not the only one that identifies with this experience. But where are we, and why aren't we attracted to this space? This is why I began the research and the journey into the Black pioneers of the American insurance industry. This is why I even took a detour from the initial book. This is why I stopped writing. I stopped writing You Should Get a License, because I said, man, I need to get this first, because I'm trying to find a book. I found great books. I found Black Titan about A.G. Gaston. I found Black Fortunes by Shamar Wills. I found some amazing books that are out there. But I didn't find one that spoke to the insurance industry. I found books about civil rights. I found books about, entrepreneurs, perhaps in the banking industry, but they didn't talk about the role that Black insurance companies played in those Black-owned banking institutions. That's what was the impetus for that book. And then after I wrote that book, I said, man, we could go. Listen, the first book, I talked about 5 entrepreneurs, 5 individuals. There are hundreds of pioneers that are Black that have contributed to this industry, that have been amazing stakeholders in this space. But that was 5. And I said, well, this was 5 pioneers, but what about those who continue to thrive after that? Because one of the things about the Pioneers book that I looked at was succession. What was the legacy of these companies today? There's only one Black-owned insurance carrier in the country today, and that's Atlanta Life Insurance Company. There's only one, none on the P&C side. Like, don't even think about property and casualty. But there's one on the life insurance side, and they don't have a consumer product. They have reinsurance products. So they're not even client-facing. So that really speaks to where we are in this space today in 2025 versus where we were in 1905 when that company was established, right? So telling these stories, once again, it wasn't to be, a subject matter expert about it. It wasn't to be, the historian or the one that people ask about these things. It was just to share the stories that nobody else was telling. It was to compile pieces of information that I would find in small paragraphs, on the internet, or I would find a name here and there, or through personalized conversations with anyone, with individuals. And then following that book, I said, hey, kind of going into the next iteration, we talk about the civil rights movement quite a bit, but if there's going to be a revolution, it might not be televised, but it certainly has to be financed. Somebody has to be paying for it. Who's paying for that? And then I started to find stories of not only some of those pioneers who were contributing to that, but other individuals as well. The reality is, good people, I wish we didn't even have to talk about Black history. I'm gonna be straight up. I wish we didn't have to isolate, a month to say, oh, this is Black History Month. I wish we didn't have or didn't need terms like Black excellence or Black girl magic or Black boy joy. I wish we did not need this terminology. The reason I wish that we did not need this terminology is because I don't believe that Black people are a subcategory of anything. Our history is history. It's American history. It's contributed to this society. It's contributed to the building of this country. It shouldn't have to be isolated. It shouldn't have to be suppressed, oppressed, put to the side, held down, hidden, erased, taken out of schools. It should be taught right alongside. And this is not a political conversation. This is a real conversation. This is about a true conversation, right? We aren't a subcategory because we aren't a sub people. And that's definitely for sure as it pertains to our achievements and the things that we've accomplished, not only in this industry, but all around the world collectively. I'll tell you this. We talk, listen, just being transparent, this is a family conversation. We can't always get organized. It's not a secret. But I'll tell you this, even being unorganized, even when we're not organized, even when we're not working in solidarity, we're still excellent, period. We're still magical, period. We're still joyful, period. We're still who we are, period. We don't have to be subcategorized. And when we make history, it's history. It's not just for 1 month. The entirety of humanity benefits from the contributions we make. And it's not like others aren't making contributions. Everyone and every ethnicity is making contributions. The problem as it pertains to contributions that Black people make is that sometimes it feels like there's a deliberate agenda or initiative to push that to the side. You can't even feel, think about this. In this country, for 400 years, you couldn't even be happy. You couldn't even smile. You couldn't even enjoy a nice day. For 400 years. And even after that 400 years, if you did too well, we're going to come and destroy what you built. We're going to come and tear that down. That is what we're up against. So we should be a prideful people. We should take the opportunity to acknowledge what we've done. The reason we have to take the opportunity to acknowledge what we've done is because if we don't tell our stories, nobody else is going to tell our stories. Nobody else is going to say, hey, young man, you come from greatness. Hey, young lady, you come from greatness. Your destiny is great. What are we given as examples? We're given athletics. We're given entertainment. Sometimes we're given other occupations. But who talks about this industry? Who talks about the examples that we can see that are not just media driven, that are shaping the infrastructure, that are guiding the vision, that are guiding the social economic standing of our country? That's what each of us who are in this industry have the opportunity to do. We have the opportunity to influence the socio-economic standing of this entire country. Every role that you are in, if you're an underwriter, if you're in claims, if you're an actuary, if you're a producer, if you're in marketing, if you're in IT, wherever you sit, the country's economics is founded upon you. I want us to just keep in mind that as we continue to celebrate the remainder of this month and as we celebrate Black history in general, we're not celebrating a subcategory of history, ladies and gentlemen. We're not celebrating subcategories. We're celebrating aspirations. We're celebrating the aspirations of the history that you and I will make as we continue to move forward. That's what we're celebrating. We're celebrating really what it means to be Black in this country, right? Not the individual accomplishments, although we can speak to those, but it's about what does it mean to be Black in America? What does it mean to be Black on planet Earth? You know, I think when we talk about, being Black, this is just I'm sharing my opinion with you guys. I'm sharing my opinion, but I think when we talk about being Black, I think it means, being bold. I think it means being very bold, being so bold it's audacious, like a William Washington Brown. You take someone like William Washington Brown, who was born enslaved, ended up fighting in the Civil War. After the Civil War, joined the temperance movement, which was a Christian movement, and went to an organization that didn't even allow Black people to enter, and said, hey, look, I'm not trying to be a part of your organization, but what if I go and start my own? And they said, well, if you go start your own, have at it. And William Washington Brown creating the Grand United Order of True Reformers and establishing the first African-American owned chartered bank in 1887 in the United States. Right here in Richmond, Virginia, in my hometown. Didn't even learn about William Washington Brown until I was an adult, by the way. His house, I pass his house, which was the bank, every single day when I take my son to school. And no one would even know that this was the first chartered Black bank in America. But what individuals also would not know is that the reason that the True Reformers Bank exists is because the Grand United Order of True Reformers also operated a life insurance company in the 1800s. And the premiums for that life insurance company helped them to establish that True Reformers Bank. First African-American owned bank, first African-American owned insurance company to use mortality tables in the country. And because those premiums helped to seed that bank, the True Reformers for a time was the largest Black-owned enterprise in the entire country for a time. To about, it wasn't a long stretch, about 1892. They didn't have a long stretch, but after William Washington Brown, there was a gentleman, Wesley Graham. He continued and had a few other companies as well. But this is a legacy that we never hear about. It's a story that's never told, and I'm thankful for organizations like NAAIA that, create the spaces and platforms to talk about this, and I'm thankful and hopeful for other organizations that have begun to talk about these kinds of stories and to speak to them as well. William Washington Brown had a quote. He said, the Negro must go into business not as an individual, but as a race. And during that time, think about this. This is someone, you talk about accomplishment, and there's a couple others that did something similar, that did the same on a bigger level, but talk about somebody who was born into nothing. There's a lot of conversations around DEI right now. Like there's a lot of panic around it, as a matter of fact. William Washington Brown, Alonzo Herndon, John Merrick, Frank Gillespie, when listen, shoot, I think DEI would have stood for divisiveness, exclusion, and shoot, you know, whatever, whatever adjective would describe a negative experience, for the eye back in those times. There was no consideration. As a matter of fact, it was a complete separation. It was like, we're not even gonna pay you attention. Take somebody like Alonzo Herndon, also born enslaved. I mean, Alonzo Herndon became, in the late 1800s, one of the most prominent barbers in Atlanta. Not only as a barber, but the money that he earned from his barbershops, he ended up investing in real estate. A practice he learned via his clients while he's cutting their hair, because his clients were all of the prominent citizens, the prominent white citizens in Atlanta. And he took that information and he put his money from his shops into real estate, and the money he got from the real estate, he ended up purchasing a failing beneficial mutual aid society, which is what these companies really were at their inception, whether it be Grand United Order of True Reformers, whether it be Atlanta Life, whether it be North Carolina Mutual, whether it be Booker T. Washington's company with what that A.G. Gaston had. I'm gonna talk about him in a minute. These companies were what you would call industrial insurance companies. They weren't offering, the policies that we hear about on social media with cash value and, even a term policy. These were burial expense policies because that's what our communities could afford, and that's what the climate dictated at that particular time. But you take somebody like Alonzo Herndon, who took that as a model and utilized it to build a company that by the 60s would have a multi-million-dollar complex in downtown Atlanta, a company that would help to subsidize other Black insurance companies around the country. A company that still stands to this day, a foundation that still stands to this day, that still supports the industry and supports growth and advancement to this day. These are the legacies that we actually have. You had John Merrick in the Raleigh and Durham area. John Merrick, who started North Carolina Mutual. He did the same thing. Born enslaved, barber, real estate, insurance. Why does no one talk about the insurance industry and how it built these Black communities, these Black Wall Streets? Whenever I hear news about, a Black-owned bank or a new Black-owned bank, it's hard for me to get excited sometimes because I'm like, where's the insurance component? Where's the insurance part of it? What y'all doing on the insurance side? It's like, no wonder the banks don't have the same financial wherewithal. They don't have the same foundation. I see certain, foundations and nonprofit organizations, and they own brokerages. 1905. Listen, when Alonzo Herndon started Atlanta Life in 1905, he started that company with literally, well, I'm not going to say nothing because he had built a business. But if you go back to how he started his original business, he's starting with nothing here. By 1924, they had 700 employees within this company. You talk about contributing to social economics, 700 employees in 1924, a wholly Black-owned institution. I'm not calling it a company. It was an institution, right? And over time, these institutions like Atlanta Life, like North Carolina Mutual, like the True Reformers and other subsequent companies, Supreme Life, Standard Life, through various legislation, through the climate of society, these companies ended up declining. The Great Depression, took a big toll on these companies. But the point is, these individuals were bold. They were bold. They said, I don't care that I was born with nada. I am going to take ownership of this situation, and I'm going to build a foundation that's going to last for 120 years. This is what these individuals did. Okay. I think that being black is to, you got to be a leader, and being a leader is not about your title. You take somebody, speaking of North Carolina Mutual, you take someone like Charles Clinton Spalding. And if you aren't familiar with Charles Clinton Spalding, I would suggest that he is someone that you can research, because Charles Clinton Spalding at one point was considered the most powerful black man in America. He was the former president of North Carolina Mutual. Because even though John Merrick founded the organization, he's not the one that took it to its ultimate heights. Charles Clinton Spalding is the one that took it to its ultimate heights, and he was not the owner. He was an executive in the company, right? He was an executive who saw an opportunity to contribute to society in a very significant way. Started part-time as an agent with North Carolina Mutual. Started part-time. And after starting part-time with the company, ended up becoming a director, and eventually ended up becoming the president of that company. Under 1948, North Carolina Mutual had $40 million in assets. He grew that company from zero, $40 million. $40 million in 1948. Now, I don't know what the translation of that is today, but I would imagine that it would be quite significant when we're talking about 1948, He was a service-driven leader. And that's what leadership is ultimately about. It's about service. How can you be of service to your community, right? Leaders like A.G. Gaston, who I mentioned. A.G. Gaston founded Booker T. Washington Insurance Company. This is a final expense company that was the foundation for a business enterprise that extended all through Alabama. 1963, when Martin Luther King wrote Letter from a Birmingham Jail, when he rooted his headquarters down in Birmingham, it was A.G. Gaston Motel where he was based out of. A.G. Gaston had built an infrastructure that said, hey, listen, when you all come here, I've built a place for you to stay. When you come here, I can cover the expenses of your travel. I can take care of what you need. He wasn't someone who was, outspoken in that movement. He was just someone who contributed, who helped to finance the movement, right? He was just he was a practitioner. Hey, I'm gonna find this need and I'm gonna fill it for whatever is necessary in my community, right? So it's he was one of those kind of leaders, or individuals like, kind of fast forwarding, Clifton Wharton Jr. I'm curious, does the name Clifton Wharton Jr. ring a bell with anyone on the call? I would just be curious to know if you know who that is. Clifton Wharton Jr. was the first Fortune 500 first Black Fortune 500 CEO. First Black Fortune 500 CEO. The company that he was a Fortune 500 CEO of was TIAA CREF, which is an insurance company. So the first Black Fortune 500 CEO was a CEO of an insurance company, Clifton Wharton Jr. Not only was he the first Black Fortune 500 CEO, he was also the chancellor of the State University System of New York. He was also the first president of a PWI university as well in Michigan. So here's an individual, when I say, hey, who knows who Clifton Wharton is? Accomplishment after accomplishment after accomplishment across industries. And we never hear about him. He has a great book, by the way. It's called Privilege and Prejudice. His father was a diplomat. And he grew up, traveling the world. He had a great life coming up. But he was able to take his advantages in education and in resources and parlay it into a career that spanned decades and impacted thousands. Okay. Clifton Wharton Jr., definitely a name. I mean, once again, leader. So you got to have that leadership, that leadership space. And I think as a Black man, look, you gotta be focused on just leading a productive life on a day-to-day basis. You know, you gotta figure out how to lead yourself in such a way that allows you to navigate a system that doesn't always, have the best for you in mind. You know, you have to be willing to step out of the box. I think, being Black is also about achievement. It's about achievements like what Ernesta Prokop did with E.G. Bowman. She has a quote. She said, I didn't know it couldn't be done, so I just went ahead and did it. That's her quote. I didn't know it couldn't be done, so I just went ahead and did it. What did she do? She became the first Black-owned and woman-owned insurance brokerage on Wall Street, New York. She bought premier products to Black communities. She brought the carriers to the communities in New York and said, hey, look at these individuals. Look at these neighborhoods. Look at how these people are living. They're worth that coverage. In addition to her other large commercial, deals that she was able to pull off through the course of her career. And her legacy is still felt to this day. I mean, we can continue, on those achievements. I mean, we can look at, young brothers like Jelani Fenton, and some of you might know Jelani, but Jelani, starting his company in InsurTech and in education, Safari, which is an insurance career development tech company, but evolving that and taking his experience as a broker and purchasing E.G. Bowman, purchasing that to carry on that legacy. Just last year or the year before, purchasing that company. Here's a young guy that says, man, I didn't know it couldn't be done, so I just did it. He went out, he raised the money for it, he found it, and he bought the company. I don't even know if Jelani is 35 years old, running this institution and perpetuating this legacy. So you got to be willing to take those steps to achieve like Cirillo McSween. Cirillo McSween, who was the first Black agent with New York Life Insurance Company. He became a life insurance agent for New York Life in 1957. New York Life is a company that, let alone, didn't necessarily want black agents. I mean, the first 300 of their first 1,000 policies were on enslaved lives for the benefit of the slave owners. So here's a company that certainly, was not invested in building any type of Black economic prosperity in the country. And he was told that he was unfit to be an agent for New York Life Insurance Company. He heard a professor at his college talking about careers in insurance and how they could be prominent. By the way, back in the 1950s and 60s, working in the insurance industry was one of the few white collar jobs a Black person could get. Medgar Evers started in the insurance industry as his first professional career working for Magnolia Life Insurance Company in Mississippi. The only reason that he got involved with the NAACP is because when he was going around to Black neighborhoods and areas and seeing how people were living, he was motivated to do something about it. And that's how he got involved with NAACP. But we don't talk about insurance when we talk about Medgar Evers. We don't talk about that. Once again, you're going to have that movement. You're going to have that revolution. But hey, how is it being financed? What's happening there? So back to Cirillo. Cirillo, when he was told that he was unfit to be an agent, he drove from Chicago to New York to see the president of New York Life in person. He ended up meeting with the VP, like waiting for hours and hours. And eventually he was allowed to become a sub broker for another agent. And in his rookie year, ended up becoming $1 million producer, outperforming everybody. Right? Got so big in the company that they still run documentaries about Cirillo McSween today when they talk about New York Life. He ended up going and buying McDonald's and becoming a big McDonald's franchise holder, when it was all said and done. So these individuals, they achieved, because this is what we do. We achieved, and now when you think about New York Life, not only are you thinking about, and you may not even think about Cirillo McSween, but you're thinking about their offer. You think about the offers and things that they do from a product standpoint, but shoot, NAAIA wouldn't exist without Lane Dixon vicariously, who also was a New York Life agent, right? Because if there was no Cirillo McSween, there would be no Lane Dixon. Lane Dixon Education Day is what Gerald Tillman went to set the tone for what NAAIA will become, done by the American College back in the day. So these things are continuously running running concurrently and progressing through the generations, you know? Because at the end of the day, anytime someone is making those achievements, it's not just an achievement for the individual, it's an achievement for the culture, because being Black is about culture, right? It's not just about being for the culture, because frankly, we are the culture, you know? The music, the sports, the fashion, you know, who influences that, you know, around not just around the country, but around the world. You know, I saw a video the other day of some folks in Thailand who were kind of emulating hip hop culture, you know, the dress and the style, you know, not in that lifestyle, but, you know, what has hip hop done over the last 50 years? You know, what has happened there? But it's about cultural influence. Cultural influence to say, hey, we're gonna work for the benefit of evolving the whole. Like Frank Gillespie, we talked about, you know, some of these Black-owned life insurance companies, but Frank Gillespie up in Chicago, in Ohio with Supreme Life, you know, founded that company, and also founded an organization, not NAAIA, but NAIA, which means purpose in Swahili, but the NIA, National Insurance Association, in 1921. Okay. Now here's the thing about the National Insurance Association. The National Insurance Association was not founded for insurance professionals. It was founded for Black insurance carriers, for the carriers. Because at that time, there was a multitude of carriers around the country. And I'm going to put a bow on this because I see we're getting to our 45-minute mark. I don't know if I got 45 minutes or a little bit more because I came in late. But when we talk about somebody like Frank Gillespie, he started NAIA, National Insurance Association. But it was Charles Clinton Spalding who took the reins of leadership to build that organization as well, while he was working for North Carolina Mutual. And this is the initial trade association for Blacks in insurance. By 1960, now here's the thing, by 1960, there were 46 companies that were members of NAIA. They represented $1.6 trillion in premiums in 1960, $300 million in revenue in 1960. Okay, that's $3.2 billion today, by the way. $3.2 billion, when you talk about that, that's on par with companies like Nationwide, AIG, MetLife. It's in the same market cap. By 1991, that organization was completely gone. None of those companies were left, except for one. That was Atlanta Life, right? And thank goodness for Magic Johnson, you know, for bringing that back to the frame of awareness, you know, with his influence and power. But these are individuals that were for cultural movements. I mean, even in modern times, look at, you know, if you guys are familiar with Ngozi Anaji, if you know what Ngozi's doing with the Black Friday Network, starting the first Black aggregator this industry has ever seen. Come on now, what kind of undertaking is that? That's for the culture. She's like, yo, let's take these agencies and create mechanisms and resources for them. People who are for the culture, you know. And what does that culture do? That culture forwards knowledge, because it's also about knowledge. You know, it's about knowledge of self. It's about knowledge of where you come from so you can understand where you're going. And those individuals who continue to perpetuate that knowledge, like Lee Bethel, you know, 40 plus years in the business, trained by Lane Dixon. You know, his uncle, Ted Tillman, third Black agent at New York Life Insurance Company. Individuals like Kathy Conley Jones, who began her career in education, ended up building one of the largest minority and women-owned brokers in the Midwest. You know, people like Quincy Branch, second generation agency leaders, you know, out in Nevada, coming from, you know, his dad and what he initially established, Aubrey Branch, and then Quincy coming in and taking that business to new heights and continuing to scale and build that business across the country. And leaders like Gerald Tillman, who, without Gerald Tillman, we're not here today. But without Lane Dixon, we're not here today. You know, without Cirillo McSween, we're not here today. Without Alonzo Herndon, John Merrick, Frank Gillespie, Charles Spalding, we're not here today. Ernesto Proco, we're not here today. Charmaine Dixon up in DC, we're not here today. You know, and we continue to perpetuate these legacies with the leadership of individuals like Omar Jahi Aarons, who is taking NAAIA, into the future, continuing to expand the base and create a new path, for the future of this organization. I just want to say that, as we leave here, we're not, I don't care what's happening in society. We're powerful. We're not powerless. We're powerful, not powerless. And let your state of Blackness shine through. Let your boldness, let your leadership, let your achievement, let your culture, let your knowledge, let it continue to shine through. Okay? Because just because there are hurdles don't mean they have to hinder. Right? Just because they're hurdles, they don't have to hinder. I am so appreciative for the opportunity to speak and share with all of you. I thank you for the time, and I appreciate the platform, just to speak. And I look forward to meeting, whom I can in the various settings in my mission, to be of service and continue to add value to this industry as well. And I hope I see all you in Philly at the NAAIA conference this year also. That being said, remember your state of Blackness as we continue not only through this month, but through the rest of this year and through the rest of our lifetimes. And as we pour them into our children and future generations that are coming after us, man, understand that your role in this industry is not just your job. It is not just what you're doing in your 9 to 5. We all have a responsibility and a duty to give our best, be our best every single day, and add value everywhere we are with everyone we touch. So thank you very much. And congratulations to all of you who are the new innovators and visionaries in today's modern time. That's all. Appreciate you.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. So I have a few things written down and definitely want to end with a couple of questions for those who can hold the line. So quick takeaways or high hits, right? Like, take chances, right? Identify a need and close the gap, and ultimately add value, because like you just ended, you're contributing to yourself, your race, and the industry.
Yep.
So I'm going to go ahead and end that and give it over to Laura, and she can ask a couple of questions, and hopefully you have a few minutes to answer them for us.
Sure.
Perfect. Thank you. And Rod, thank you so much for your time today. That was incredible. And I think I speak on behalf of everybody to say we're very honored to have heard from you today, and really excited to take this message away with us. Looking at some of the questions, one from Brian Bruner. In reflecting on the achievements and challenges faced by Black pioneers in the insurance industry, how can we draw inspiration from their experiences and take practical steps to create a more inclusive and equitable environment for future generations?
Man, that is such a big question, Well, one thing I'll say is this. The reason that we learn about other people's experiences is because those serve as lessons that we can apply to our own journey. They serve as ways for us to find maybe just that little bit of energy to keep going to that next day. For me and my journey in entrepreneurship, like I tell people, I was like, I quit every day. I quit and rehire myself every day, But I think about those stories. I think about the stories that I've learned about. And those are the stories that say, listen, if Cirilla McSween can drive across the country, I can make a call. I can drive, 3 hours to take a meeting, That's where we have to, I guess, find the intrinsic motivators in those stories to drive our own journey, because everybody's experience is going to be their experience. When you talk about the practical steps, I think the practical steps begin with, one, researching the avenues that are going to be advantageous for you to add some value to. Like, where can you add some value? What are the skills that you possess, and what can you do with those skills? Practical steps for me was, hey, listen, it's the pandemic. Nobody can get out. I'm going to start recording these videos, and I'm going to put them on my LinkedIn. I'm going to put them on YouTube, and apparently, 10,000 people on YouTube found some kind of value because they subscribed to it, So, it's just about doing it. You don't have to to wait until the time is right. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be all the way fine-tuned. Just take what you have and share it with the world, because that's why you are here. You are here for a purpose and for a reason. So I would say the practicality is, what are the skills that you've cultivated? Understand that there's value in those skills and share them wherever you can.
I love that. Thank you so much. Okay, I think maybe we have time for one more question, and I feel like this will be a great one to close on. In the spirit of the each one, teach one strategy, I wonder what is one thing that you would want us to take away to share with someone who was unable to attend? And that was submitted by Jerusa, Washington.
Man, I love that question. Share the story of one of these innovators, and that's one of the reasons why I'm so glad that some of you are going to get a copy of the book. If there's a takeaway, buy a copy of the book if you weren't one of the first 20, and gift it to someone else. Gift it to someone else, because just like some of the stories I'm sharing are new to you, at one point, not too long ago, they were new to me. I didn't know. I found out about Clifton Wharton is because I wanted to know. Well, I know we've had Black Fortune 500 CEOs. Who was the first Black Fortune 500 CEO? I found that it was Clifton Wharton Jr. And I was like, and it was an insurance company? Wow. Right? So get those tools, get those resources, and share the information. Share the information. I think that's the most powerful thing that we can do. All you can do is plant a seed. We can't control what people do, where they're guided. All we can do is just, share what we get. The best way to learn something oftentimes is just to teach it to somebody else. When you get that information, share it with somebody else.
No, that's wonderful. Thank you. And we will be notifying today the folks who will be receiving one of those first 20 copies. So the rest of you need to go out there. Rod, in closing, could you tell us where we can find you, where we can follow you to continue listening to your great message?
Hey, thank you. Thank you, Lauren, for that. If you are on LinkedIn, it's Gerard Rod Powell Senior. Subsequently, you can also just follow You Should Get a License on LinkedIn, which is the platform. That is not my personal page. If you send a message to You Should Get a License, I am not getting that message. That is just the platform. Somebody else is running that for me. But you can connect with me on LinkedIn. If you're on the social media platforms, on every social media platform, it's at The Rod Powell, TheRodPowell, TheRodPowell. And love connecting there as well. I'm gonna be a little bit more loose on Instagram than I am on LinkedIn. So if you're ready for that, come on.
Perfect. I'm looking you up right now. No, wonderful. Thank you again so much for your time, Rod. I'm gonna send it back to Sean to take us home. I've really enjoyed the time we got to spend with you today. So thank you.
Thank you again so much, everybody.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. We are connected on LinkedIn. Hopefully, I can get sponsorship to Philly. Not a Chiefs fan, but I don't know how many Kansas City people are willing to come to Philly these days.
Oh, but, man, listen, I hope that today gave the Kansas City people a little bit more hope, for the future.
Yeah, absolutely. But no, definitely appreciate your time. Appreciate everything you gave us today. Lots of gems, and definitely appreciate everybody who was able to attend today. So looking forward to staying connected, and we have some activities that'll be coming up. So please look at NAAIA Kansas City's page and join us on our next event. Everyone have a great day.
Thank you very much again.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.